Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm Chris and this is Regular Guy Training. So today we're going to go ahead and talk about something that I've been kind of messing with for a little while now. This isn't really a qualification or like a student or an instructor qualification because I'm a non-believer in both. What this really is that it's a really good way to gauge where you are, and it's highly modifiable for what it is that you want to do. Especially as you start to climb, on the skill ladder a little bit. So the DNA of the scoring system behind this was actually from a Pat McNamara course that I took a while back. Those of you that have taken Pat McNamara courses and have shot similar systems to this, you'll recognize it a little bit. Only thing that I'd really done in the past is take it and dick with it a lot. So we'll see what this is about. Now, as you can see, we have ourselves our A, C, and D zones, right? What this is it's a two-phase 40-round set that you're going to fire. There is a scoring system involved, so we're going to pay attention to the scoring system involved. Now, each phase, I guess you can say, is 20 rounds, right? Each set of 20 rounds can be valued to a possible 100. Like, that's the highest possible score that you could get, is a 100. Now, here's how we factor in penalties and that kind of stuff before we get into shot strings and everything else. Your whole A zone, okay, is a -0, okay? Your C zone, also your head, is a -1, because the head would be a good place to shoot and that would look real cool, and that wouldn't be a penalty if you were shooting there, but you're not. You're going into here. And what that really is at that point is it's a high-heeled shot, and self-defense and all that stuff, especially some of the distances we're going to shoot. Shooting at the head is kind of a bad idea. So -0, -1, okay, so in the C zone and the head, that's -1, -3. A complete miss is a -5. A overtime, meaning if you fire a shot over the par time of whatever shot string you're in, that's a -5. And an overshoot is a -5. Because each phase is supposed to have 20 rounds. If you fire 22 rounds, it's -5 per. All of these stack, by the way. So if you have 2 in your C zone, you have 2 in your D zone, 2 complete misses, right? So that's 2 plus 6, it's 8. 2 completely out, that's plus 10. Make sense? So 18 off the bat. Fair enough? And all of this stacks with anything else. Now here's the thing too. A lot of qualifications that we do accept perforated line hits, meaning if you touch the line of that A zone, you're in the -0 range. That's not how we do this here. If you touch the line, meaning if it's a half in, half out, you go to the next lowest score. So for instance, we're trying to shoot the A zone, but we have a half in, half out hit on that line. It's a -1 because that's in the C zone. So if you have a half in, half out hit on the D zone, that's a -5 because it's a complete miss as far as the scoring system is concerned. The theology behind this is bad guys don't have to be good, they just have to be lucky. So you have to be so good that you manufacture luck. And, mediocrity is not something that we want to reward. Does that make sense? So almost is a no. Okay? So there's that. So now that the scoring system is there, again, 100 out of a possible 20, -1, -0, -1, including the head, that's also -1, -3, complete miss, -5, a overtime is a -5, and an overshoot is a -5 per round. Okay? So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and talk about the shot strings themselves now that we know the scoring system, now that we know the number of rounds that we need to fire and that kind of stuff per phase. So, first phase is essentially this. We start, and this is handgun, okay? We start at the 25, okay? holstered up, all that stuff. And this is all these times are geared towards concealed. Okay, so whether it's appendix or strong side or whatever, these are all based off of concealed times. So we start at the 25. You have 8 seconds to fire 10 rounds into that A zone from 25. Now that sounds like it's a lot until you actually start doing it. Okay, because typically speaking, people aren't pushing sub-second shots at 25. And all the boxes that you need to check in order to make sure that you don't miss that guy completely at 25, especially when you're under time. That timer does shit to people. So 10 rounds, 8 seconds at the 25 from the draw. And it's all one shot string. So you draw it, you fire 10 rounds, and then you holster up. Again, if you have any overtimes, you want to start counting those up in your head. So, because you will add them all together through the strings and then use that as your penalties. So, we start at 25, we fire those 10 rounds. Then, we take ourselves to the 10-yard line. Now, from here, it's 5 individually timed reps of a single draw and a single shot. So you draw, you fire 1 shot at 10 yards, and you have a second and a half to do it. Make sense? Now, again, a second and a half sounds like a lot, but it's also at 10 yards. We see a lot of the sub-second times. I mean, hell, I could pull off sub-second time at like stupid close distances, but realistically speaking, those are almost masturbatory distances. You need to be able to see what you need to see and break the shot inside of a second and a half, right? That's at 10 yards, and again, we're still shooting at that whole A zone. So that's 5 individual reps. If you've been keeping up, that's 15 rounds now, right? 15 rounds. So then we go up to 5 yards. Once we go up to 5 yards, it is a single draw, and you will fire continuously 5 rounds into that A zone, and you have 2.75 seconds to do it. Okay. Reason for this is a okay build drill is inside of 3 seconds. A good one is inside of 2. Right, so including the draw time and all that stuff from concealed, 2.75 is a good base. By the way, all of this is the base drill, and we're going to talk about how we modify it later. So that's first phase, that's 20 rounds, and the reason why we're at 5 for those 5 rounds from that draw is, typically speaking, you know, the 5 and 3 yard line draw single shots. You know, you can just get them out there, you don't even really have to be at extension for a lot of them, and you can get a hit. Now we got to tighten up. Well, now we have to have a decent amount of control, and we have to have our timing down well enough as far as our cadence and everything else to make sure that all 5 of those rounds stay in the zone that we need to stay in. Make sense? So there we go. That's the first phase. That's 20 rounds. Okay. The second phase. Well, let's talk about how we're going to score phases first before I talk about the second phase. Once you have that first 20 rounds fired, what you're going to do is, before you even look at this, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to count up how many overtimes that you've got, right? Because if you've got any, I would immediately deduct that from your overall 100. So for instance, if you have 3 overtimes to start with all this, okay, we have immediately started at an 85. Does that make sense? Because they're -5 each. And then I'm going to go count how many bullet holes I have on this thing. If I've got, and in this particular case, we're starting with 85. Let's say that I have 2 missing from the board completely, right? So that's -10 total, because it's -5 per missed shot. So now we start at 75. Okay, I hope you're following still. And then we will count what is in or out of the particular zones, right? So let's say that the rest of this we shot fairly well. We've got 3 in the C zone. Okay, let's say that we've got 1, 2, and then a third in like the neck, right? So we have 75, that's -3, that's 72, and then let's say that there's 1 on the line out here, right? We're at a 69, because that's -3. So all of your penalties stack together. Does that make sense? So that's how we would score that individually per phase. Now let's talk about the second phase. Okay, the second phase doesn't start with any par times. You start with one hand, you're at 25, and it's your dominant hand, and you will fire 5 rounds untimed at the 25. After you fire those 5 rounds, again at the A zone at 25, we're going to holster up, move forward to the 20-yard line, and then we're going to go ahead and go to the other hand, one-handed. Okay, so now we're on the weak side, and there's no timer on it, 5 rounds from the weak side. And then we go up to the 10-yard line. Once we're at the 10-yard line, you're going to need an empty magazine, and you need a round and a pipe. Okay, because we're setting up a shot, reload, shot set. And we're going to do 5 reps of that, totaling 10 rounds. Okay, so once we're there, we're at the 10-yard line, we need to be able to draw, fire a shot, get the reload, and fire another shot inside of 4 seconds. Okay, so once we have all of that done, once we've got all 5 of those reps in, that's 10 total rounds on that set, including the one-handed shooting. That's 20 rounds. We score it how we just talked about it, right? So now I have a phase 1 total score and a phase 2 total score, and then you're going to add those two together, right? Totaling, let's say that dude had a pair of 70s, right? So phase 1, he shot a 70. Phase 2, he shot another 70. It's happened before. You're now at a 140 total out of 200. Does that make sense? So all of this requires all of the skills that you absolutely have to have before you start doing a lot of different things. Okay, more advanced stuff, air quotes, like footwork, switch hand, a lot of different switch hand stuff, work and cover, mess around in cars, all that other stuff. These are all skills that you absolutely have to have, and it's a good gauge to where you're at, especially if you shoot it cold, right? And typically speaking, it's 40 rounds of your time. You can do it cold, which is great. And if you have a 25-yard line indoor range, you can do this at that range. Does that make sense? Assuming that they're not gay and they let you do reloads and holster work and that kind of stuff, which I'm aware a lot of them don't. But, so there it is. That's our base drill. We're just going to summarize it really quickly again before we move on. So, first phase is 20 rounds, okay? You're going to start at the 25 from the draw, 10 rounds, 8 seconds. We're shooting at the A zone, right? Then we go to the 10-yard line, and it's 5 different reps of a single draw and a shot at 10 yards. Inside of a second and a half each rep. Okay? Once we have those 5 in, that's 15 total rounds. At this point, we go to the 5-yard line, we draw at the 5, and we put 5 rounds in, sub 2.75. Okay? And as a note, by the way, the only leniency that I really have during this is that if you come in right at 2.75 or right at 1.5 on the draw, you made it. So you don't have an overtime then. So that's the first phase, that's 20 rounds. The second phase, you start at the 25, strong hand only, 5 rounds, no time limit on that specifically. Then you move up to the 20-yard line, weak hand only, no time limit, 5 rounds into the A zone. And then we move up to the 10-yard line, and we will do 5 reps of a shot, reload, and a shot for 10 rounds total on that set, making 20 rounds. That is both of your phases. And it both amounts to 40 rounds for a possible of 200. Each phase, obviously, you score out of 100, and then there you go. If there's any questions on math and that kind of stuff, you can throw that in the comments, because I lose everybody when it comes to a scoring system until I've done it a couple of times. So there's that. Now, obviously, I've said that this is the base drill, and that's the whole point. This is actually pretty difficult to max because it requires you to do a lot of different things correctly, and it requires you to do a lot of things correctly and also fairly quickly. But let's say that you're at a point where you're trying to max it, and it's really difficult. Well, here's the thing about this. The minute you start getting close to maxing it, you should start making this harder. And here's how we do this. Because with the base drill, at the moment, I currently live somewhere between high 160s and low 180s. Right? So that's between 80 and 90% in both events. But that's the base drill. And I don't like being at that point for a scoring system, because at that point I'm starting to cruise a little bit, and you shouldn't during this whole thing. Right, so now we make things a little bit harder. The way that we can make this a little bit more difficult is that instead of shooting at the whole A zone, we can basically cut that A zone in half to where now it's basically a heart box zone. Because at that heart box zone, I mean, if you just cut this off right about in here, I'm going to use my little Sharpie as a pointer. You basically cut that in half, it's basically an upper thoracic, right? Center of the chest, right at the nip line is basically where that A sits, so that's pretty much where I want to be. So that is your down 0 zone. The other half of that A zone is now your -1. So this, including your C, including your head, is a -1. And then you have a -3 and then a -5. So that's just one way to make it harder, though. Another way that you can do this, and you know, a couple of guys, you know, that I personally hang around with, we've also decreased how long you have for a lot of these. So for instance, instead of 8 seconds at 25 yards to fire 10 rounds, we now have 6. And considering the average draw time at that distance, 6 seconds starts to not be a lot of time if I'm trying to hit well. You know, because yeah, absolutely, I can blow 10 rounds inside of that time, but I need to balance it at that distance, right? So 6 seconds starts to really not be a whole lot of time for that without having crazy penalties in there. The draw time at 10 yards got decreased to minimum 1.4 seconds. And that whole 1/10 of a second that we subtract at 10 yards now, because again, everybody can do a sub-second at 3 yards. That has been doing this a little while. Being able to get consistent 1.4s and lower with a good hit, and seeing everything you're supposed to see, and pressing off a good shot at, you know, a box that is that size, can be pretty difficult. So you have to have your P's and Q's in order to get that done at a 1.4 or lower. And then once we get to the 5-yard line and we're going to draw and fire those 5 rounds, we now have to get it done in sub 2.3, depending on how we're feeling that day, sub 2.2. So again, considering the draw times and considering the individual split times per shot, that's not a whole lot of time to get it done. But it can be done because, again, a good build drill is sub 2 seconds, right? Right now, if I don't screw everything up, I live at like 2.1, so a build drill for me would be like 2.3 something. So I'm getting there. So that's first phase, and as far as the second phase is concerned and making it more difficult, target zone stays the same for both hands. So the first 5 rounds and then the second 5 rounds, we stay at the 25-yard line. We don't close at 5 yards. And now the shot reload shot needs to be sub 3.4 instead of sub 4 seconds. So now everything has to be perfect. I don't have time to fix any issues that I have. And if I get over aggressive with my hands and slide doesn't lock to the rear, I basically went over time on that one, blah, blah, blah. So there it is. You also can't really cheese it, because once you have your target zone and your times, you can't just shoot slow and hope for like a minimum score that is like a 50 or something like that per phase, because the penalties involved in that will bring you significantly lower than that. However, if you can't meet the time, get the hit, right? So that's basically how you make this more difficult. Now, I thoroughly recognize I'm about to get 1,000 different questions, and that's fine, because the next video, I'm going to try and answer those the best I can. But as far as the next video that I'm going to shoot is concerned, I'm going to shoot this base drill with a handgun, and then you know, I'm going to post that score. You know, we're going to write it down, do the math, all that stuff. And then I'm going to look significantly worse, because then I'm going to go to the system that I just talked about, and I'll probably have a, you know, just knowing me, I'll probably screw up at one point or another, because the target sizes and time frames that you set need to be like at your apex. Okay, this is designed not to pat you on the back, but to force you to fail until you stop failing. Does that make sense? So I'll shoot both of those, I'll score both of those, you know, let's talk about it a little bit. You know, so, and any questions that you have in the meantime, I'll go ahead and answer. So, seeing all of this in place, there is a rifle portion of this. I'll get to that at some point, right? But again, if you have any questions, if you like the drill, let me know, because I have a bunch of students over the last few classes that have shot this, and they either love it or hate it. You know, it is what it is. But there is a limit to when you should do this, to how many times you should do this particular drill. And I keep it at 2 a day. 1 at the very front end, 1 at the very back end, if you're going to do it twice. Lately, I've just been doing it cold just to see where I live on as far as the base drill side of the house, and then I shrunk it down to the much more difficult portion, or scoring system rather. And when you start not looking impressive, it shows you places that you need to work, right? So we're going to see what happens as far as the next thing is concerned. I'm going to go at it cold and blah blah blah. So. I've rambled on enough about that. If you guys want to come out and train with us, you absolutely can. I'm posting more classes as we go. If you guys want to support us on Patreon, you absolutely can. If you want to get something out of supporting us through Patreon, if you sign up for $41 a month, you can train with us as much as you want, so long as you're signed up to that. It's just once you sign up, shoot me an email, and I'll see if there's a spot open on a roster. Classes that are coming up, we've got Kentucky. I'm getting ready to plan Georgia. We have a vehicle class that's already done. I'm getting ready to go to Mississippi this month. And I've all but completely settled Pennsylvania. So that's a thing. It's just more will go up as we go. I want to thank you guys for helping us out a lot. If you want to buy a patch from us, I'll shoot a link for that. Same thing for the Facebook page. You guys have seen us through a pretty tough year, and I appreciate that. So, I'm done with the plugs. I'm done with the video. Remember, guys, regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Easy.